Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma, and I am flying solo following day 2 of the 2024 NFL Draft. Yeah, it's a late Friday evening, folks, and that means, well, Brian was out hiking. I think the Flash was out partying with some other folks, but chatting it up on Twitter and getting some of his thoughts. We'll swing back around collectively with all 3 days of NFL Draft coverage early next week, just in case we don't catch ins, on the weekend here with day 3, and not a whole lot for the Steelers on day 3, to be honest. A 4th round pick and 2 6th round picks, nothing in the 5th round, nothing in the 7th round. That could always change, so we will be monitoring that and get you information when we can. But we have plenty to speak of following day 1 of the NFL Draft, of course, with the Steelers having Troy Fontenot trying to get the name down, trying to stick the landing, according to Cam Hayward. Thank you for some of you folks that were out there being the grammar Nazis. You know what? You probably didn't realize this. English major here. I don't always speak like it, and that's because I come from the Rust Belt, right? I think that's why I joke with people. That's why I became an English major. But I digress. Steelers, they pick up a tackle who was not the blindside protector, because I failed to mention this on the show with Brian. That was yesterday, last night. I'm losing track of everything. Following day 1, go back if you want to hear about Fontenot, the new tackle that should be the Steelers' starting right tackle. There's a lot of mixed information out there. Almost said misinformation. I don't know. It might not be misinformation, or, I'll give some credit to where it's due. A lot of these folks that are scrapping and compiling a lot of the draft data that's out there, they do so by talking to their various sources, and they could be at all different levels within an organization, and different organizations view players in different ways. Of course, myself and Brian were mocking Graham Barton, who played tackle at Duke. A lot of folks think he's going to be a guard. A lot of folks thinks he could be a center, where we're thinking maybe a center for the Steelers. And that's where some people were looking at Troy and the pick that was made in the 1st round. And I had to say, the Steelers, I believe, they made the move for Broderick Jones and want him to play left tackle, but the right tackle play was so poor last year that they switched Broderick Jones over there. Now they understand that Dan Moore is not the future at this position. He's entering the final year of his contract, and his play has been below the line. So in order to do what do they need to do? Well, they could take Fontenot, who played left tackle. A lot of people think, well, he's not going to play left tackle at the next level, but he has the same arm length as like Joe Alt. There's people making all kinds of different assumptions. There's even folks that were thinking, oh, this guy could play center. Now, I did think, though, that when Omar Khan and Mike Tomlin got on the horn, they said, hey, we view this guy as a tackle. Are they still doing this whole National Liars Month thing where you're trying to game and do basically like spy versus spy operations and fool other teams, and maybe you do play him as a center? You know what I mean? That's always a possibility. We always said, hey, they still have Dan Moore, they still have a starter in case they take a swing and a miss, and they don't get another tackle in this draft. Well, they got a tackle, and they also ended up landing their center, Zach Frazier from West Virginia, 2nd round pick, 51st overall pick in the 2024 NFL Draft. So, without further ado, let me look at some of Zach Frazier's numbers, a 4-year player with West Virginia, with the Mountaineers, and over the last 3 years, because that's what Pro Football Focus really gives us, right? I accidentally got Roman Wilson up, which would be some interesting. That would be the next pick. That would be some interesting counts there. I'm like, wait a minute. But, we talked a lot about experience here, right? And that was one of the things with Amarius Mims, if you were watching some of the pre-draft coverage. And Mike Tomlin likes his guys to be kind of seasoned, okay? And you have Zach Frazier. He's played at least a dozen games in each of the last 3 years, over 800 snaps, over 2,400 snaps in the last 3 years. I wish I could compile a little bit more information here, but his pass block grade's pretty high. Run block grade is getting there. It's nowhere near as low as maybe some others, but considered maybe one of the top 2 or 3 centers, depending on where you view Graham Barton, and also announced as a guard when he was drafted today ahead. I know some people are getting a little nervous, getting a little twitchy, but Oregon's Jackson Powers Johnson announced as a guard when he was selected. So was it offensive lineman? I think they specifically said guard because NFL Network had called that out. So yeah, and that happens. Creed Humphrey, got drafted center. They were looking a couple years ago, and everybody's like, "Oh, take Creed Humphrey, can't take Landon Dickerson." And Dickerson has been playing guard for the Eagles. Humphrey has been a center. So Zach Frazier, a lot of folks feel this is going to be a guy plug and play, day one starter on the Steelers offensive line. They're going to have some changes. Fontenot should be the right tackle. Like I was trying to get this out. I'm not sure if I effectively said it, but Michael Penix is a left-handed quarterback. So Fontenot was not the blindside protector in Washington. So he was in the flipped coverage schemes. So he fits in on the right side. All he's got to do is mimic some of these things. I understand that some of this schematically would be different, but maybe not so much when you're dealing with a left-handed quarterback. You see what I mean? So when he's playing on the left and you have a left-handed quarterback, the right tackle becomes the, quote, blindside protector. I'm sorry if I'm speaking down to anybody out there, but it makes a lot of sense to me, and I wanted to make sure that I hammered that out there. So anyways, Zach Frazier hopes to be another in a long line of maybe this is the one that the Steelers finally got. You know what I mean? They've had lulls in the middle before when they've had the transition, like Dermontti Dawson, the torch going to Marquise Pouncey, had to pass through a few people. It was painful when it went to Sean Mahan. You had Jeff Hardings, you had Justin Hartwig, you had, free agents, you had some guys that were serviceable. Certainly Kendrick Green and Mason Cole did not live up to the passing of the torch from Marquise Pouncey to hopefully Zach Frazier. If the Steelers nailed these draft picks with Fontenot and Frazier with their top 2, first time they've gone with 2 offensive linemen back-to-back in a draft since 2012. That was David DeCastro and then Mike Adams, who was a tackle from Ohio State, if you happen to remember him. And they actually ended up taking a tackle later in that draft as well, 7th round, Kelvin Beachum, who may actually still be playing in the NFL. Like, that dude has had one hell of a career and just kind of got the short end because of contract and salary cap at Pittsburgh and continued to play. So good for him. But anyways, also this was another tidbit that I had heard, and I'm not exactly, I didn't get to do my homework on this. So this is said face value. This could be wrong. Don't believe everything you hear or read on the internet, but if somebody could back me up on this and find it, first time that the Steelers have taken offensive linemen back-to-back drafts in the first round, I believe, or in a very long time. But at least in my lifetime, I don't remember off the top of my head with that happening. I know somebody was like, "Oh, well, there was Pouncey and DeCastro." No, there wasn't Pouncey and DeCastro. You had Cam Hayward, in the middle of that one. So don't forget, and some great picks there. Looks like Omar Khan's really knocking this one out of the park. I'm feeling very confident about Zach Frazier, listed 6'2", 306, I believe. Let's see who else has him, 6'3", 310. So everybody has him kind of all over the place. And don't forget, 4-time state wrestling champion in high school. This is like Mike Tomlin's calling card, is finding guys that are they're athletes. They're vested in multiple sports. So 4-time state wrestling champion in high school. I mean, you just saw him. If you happen to see some of that coverage during the draft on TV, that was pretty cool and impressive from this young man. Looking forward to seeing him out on the field with Fontenot. So I think the pressing issues where everybody realizes that games are won and lost in the trenches, and getting this offensive line finally shored up. I said years ago it was a 3-year process. Looks like almost a 4-year process, but now tentatively, you've got Broderick Jones on the left and Troy Fontenot on the right as your bookends for your tackles, and then building out from the middle, Zach Frazier right there in the middle. Very young guys. Hopefully this is something that contractually, and you can work with this over at least you're going to have these guys as a nucleus for 3 or 4 years, perhaps even longer, that you lock this down. And then, of course, 2 of the better free agent signings, not just for the Steelers, but in the National Football League. At your guard positions, your left guard, Isaac Seumalo, and then you also have your right guard, James Daniels. Those guys are mean. Seumalo didn't give up a sack last year. Maybe the Steelers finally get this right. It's very difficult for me to think they could be much worse than the way Green and Cole have been playing, or even Dan Moore. Get some fresh blood in there, and we know Broderick Jones is a bully. And don't forget, Darnell Washington is practically a sixth offensive lineman. That's the way Mount Washington wants to be referred to. So the Steelers shore up this whole offensive line deal. They get strength. They get some guys that are leaders. They get some guys that seem, it's like they almost lost like a Steelers way. What is it to be a Pittsburgh Steeler? The standard is the standard. We've heard all of these things, but it seems like it's been kind of missing over the last few years. And that'll happen as players retire, move on, et cetera, et cetera. You might have some players that are still, that still display this, right? Like a TJ Watt, like a Mika Fitzpatrick. But now you're starting to get some younger guys in there. I thought it was great that Cameron Hayward is like all over kind of showing the ropes, the Troy Fontenot, bringing him into Pittsburgh, talking with them, online, the whole thing, even introducing him as the pick for the first day of the draft. So this is really cool stuff, showing them the ropes. I think both of these guys are going to be physical, mean Steelers type players. So how do you build on this? This is where, your palms start to get sweaty in the third round. Picks 84 and 98 as we see an insane. And I cannot even, I don't know. I know wide receiver. They said this is a deep wide receiver draft, a deep wide receiver class. The number of wide receivers that went on day one, and then the ones that started going and flying off the top of the board in the second round. And even into the third round. Like I was looking at Malachi Corley. Third round ends with Luke McCaffrey going to the Commanders. I was like, darn it. But the Steelers got a guy anyways. Okay. So they didn't have to take too long. But Keon Coleman right out the gate, Buffalo Bills, Ladd McConkey, Jalen Polk. There's like three guys. Then you started to finally get some defensive players. You started to get some running backs. A.D. Mitchell goes to the Colts. What was that pick? The pick right after the Pittsburgh Steelers. So Dale Lawley was talking about this and said, you have to think it's down to Frazier and Mitchell for this pick. And I was like, geez, that's the same thing. So what did the Steelers do at center if they go with Mitchell? I think they could like survive and maybe find a wide receiver, because look at how many teams have already drafted wide receiver or have guys that they're paying a lot of money to. There are all these contracts that are being shelled out at the position. So they're not just going to add, I think, just bodies. They're not going to waste like a second round pick on a guy that's not going to see the field. So I'm like, maybe they could have some patience here. And I think they did a fantastic job here with Zach Frazier. I think Daniel Jeremiah on the NFL Network broadcast said it best, that Zach Frazier or Jackson Powers-Johnson, you'd be happy with either of these guys. And he said that not during the Steelers pick, but he said it a little bit earlier, even before Jackson Powers-Johnson went to the Raiders, who announced him as a guard. So we're going to see, because they have Andre James already as a center. Let's continue going on. Not so many more wide receivers end up coming off the board. In fact, no others after A.D. Mitchell leaves with the 20th pick of the second round, 52 overall. Right after the Steelers picked Zach Frazier with pick 51, had a bunch of different, bunch of tackles. Tackles kept going. So it was just like, wow, Steelers, Omar Khan, hats off to you for being smart and getting your tackle, get that like locked down when you did, because otherwise you might have been screwed here. So you get into this, the third round. New York Jets take Malachi Corley right off the top, pick 65 overall. Continue going. What could the Steelers be looking at? Well, Junior Colson was somebody, a linebacker from Michigan, that they kind of had some interest in. He goes to the Chargers at pick 69. Pick 70, New York Giants take Andrew Phillips, corner out of Kentucky. And, of course, the corner I liked out of Rutgers was already gone. Max Melton went at some point in the second round as well. So I'm starting to get a little nervous here. I'm watching like some of the names that are coming off here. And there's no wide receiver that ends up coming off the board here until Jermaine Burton goes to the Cincinnati Bengals. 80th overall. The Steelers are on the clock at 84. Comes around to them. They've got some wide receivers that are in the mix. Now, I'm looking at some of the notes that I had here. There was still, let me see, on the board, Troy Franklin from Oregon. Roman Wilson from Michigan, Malik Washington, Virginia, Javon Baker from University of Central Florida, and then about maybe Devontae Walker, UNC. Some of these guys are still available, but this was like what was there after Burton ends up going. And I'm looking at Roman Wilson, I'm looking at Troy Franklin, and I'm like, Wilson, probably the more physical player. I'm not going to try and pretend like I knew for sure who was going to go here, because I was starting to think Payton Wilson, linebacker, NC State, and I'm just like, you know what? I think he's going to be there at 98. If they hold and they take a receiver now, I think it would be the wiser decision. So nobody else kind of like does any shenanigans. A lot of trades tonight, right? So the Steelers pull the trigger. They get Roman Wilson, wide receiver from, for those of you who are new and may not have been around here, I'm an Ohio State guy. That's my college, one of my college teams, because I'm my alma mater's an FCS team, so that doesn't count. You know what I mean? They're never they're stiff in their own type of tournament and national championship at the old 1AA level. So I'm an Ohio State guy. I watch other football and I have some teams that I prefer, and Michigan isn't one of them, obviously. And there were even some boos with some of the Michigan stuff from the Michigan State folks that were in attendance there in Detroit. 200 and whatever thousand people, 275 the first day. What a madhouse that was. The sea of people just for an NFL draft, just to see guys get their names called, but it's fun. And my cousin, Brad, he's texted me and he's like, hey, this is giving me some anxiety. This is almost like being at a game. And I'm like, yeah, it is in some cases. But Roman Wilson, obviously Deontay Johnson was traded. And they had this hole that the team had to fill. You have George Pickens. We don't know how they view Calvin Austin. They signed some kind of journeyman type, middling types at the wide receiver position that may not have fulfilled their full potential. They may not even be in play to make the final 53-man roster, depending on what else happens. Steelers could still sign a veteran. They could still make a trade. You never know. But for now, Roman Wilson from Michigan. Let me see here. I had Roman's 6 foot 192. Some folks 6 foot. Depending on where you're looking, someone somewhere listed him at 5'11", I want to say. Let's see what NFL.com had here. But he's quicker than a hiccup. See, they have him at 5'11", 185. Pro Football Focus, 6 foot 192. Another site, 6 foot 180. So he's kind of all over the map. 4.3, 940 with a 152 10-yard split. Now, it's just a hair faster on a 10-yard split to what Deontay Johnson was coming out of college. But Roman Wilson, 4.39, much faster. I think it was a 4.52 for Deontay Johnson. Only guy faster than him right now with the Steelers wide receiver group, Calvin Austin, ran a 4.32. You pair the 4.39 of Roman Wilson with a 4.32, and I know George Pickens is like a 4.5 or whatever, but these split, tenths of a second type deal. If you ever pay attention to track and field, Olympics coming around the corner makes a difference. Okay, it's gonna be tough covering all of these guys, and I know that there's people that are gonna peg Roman Wilson as like a slot receiver. This guy is physical. He may have the opportunity to jump in right away. I had my doubts as far as if Mike Tomlin and the way he operates with rookies. Deontay Johnson was out there first year. George Pickens earned his way out there by virtue of just the bodies that are available. He may be the one that gets this job as well. He did play, he played about twice as many reps out of the slot, according to Pro Football Focus, over this last year, but he also plays out on the boundary. This is the versatility that you're looking for. 48 receptions, 789 yards, 12 touchdowns. 6 of those touchdowns the first 3 games of the season last year, which not exactly the highest quality of competition when you have 3 touchdowns off of 6 receptions against East Carolina. They're not going to be the worst, but, Michigan won the national championship, right? Nevada, Las Vegas. He went 4 for 89 with 2 touchdowns, and then Bowling Green 2 for 42 with one of those being a touchdown. Usually a handful of catches. Really went off against Purdue at home back in November, 9 receptions for 143 yards. Again, finished the season 48 receptions, 789 yards, 12 touchdowns. Another player that was a 4-year player at Michigan. These are the things that Mike Tomlin looks at and looks for experience. So 13 games, 6 games as a freshman, 13 as a sophomore, another dozen as a junior, and 15 last season because you got the playoff games and, bowl statistics, everything also included in that tally. So Roman Wilson will be interesting. He'll be able to take the top off. He's got a top gear. It's hard to catch it. If Russell Wilson's still got that deep ball arm, we know Justin Fields has got the cannon. If these guys, they don't have to stand around and wait for slowpokes to get down the field like Kenny Pickett did. And when you're talking about this new offensive line with Frazier, Fontenot, Jones, Sumalo, Daniels, maybe given guys that have traditionally taken longer to get rid of the ball, maybe because they haven't had guys that could just flat out take the top off of a defense. And you put Austin out there, and then you still have Pickens, who's very difficult to catch. It's going to be hard to double team. And I think this was a very, very wise move. Talking with my cousin, I don't like to place any names on anybody, but the toughness here, the physicality, the willingness to block with Roman Wilson, he fits the Steelers mold. The Michigan Wolverines, very much a run-first type oriented team. That's all people are talking about with Jim Harbaugh taking over the Los Angeles Chargers. So if you keep all of that into perspective here, I'm hoping you got somebody that's in a Hines Ward type of mold. Now, that's an all-time Steelers great that's borderline getting a bust in Canton. I don't want to put that type of expectation on any player that's coming out of the draft into the National Football League, but I would like to see I would like to see some of those traits. I believe we'll see some of those traits from Roman Wilson. Now, the other Wilson ends up landing in the Steelers' lap. I should wait a minute before I get to the other Wilson. I kind of wonder, too, if Roman Wilson, the Steelers got to do something about a punt returner because Cordarrelle Patterson is a kick returner, not a punt returner. And Calvin Austin was kind of scary back there. Gunnar Olszewski, long gone. How many wide receivers will they actually roster? Maybe Quez Watkins is a guy, but are they going to roster 2 guys to particularly just play special teams? That's why I was so kind of like over, enamored with trying to get somebody like a Luke McCaffrey that could be a slot and maybe grow and be like an Eli Rogers type guy. Remember Eli Rogers? So anyways, the other Wilson at 98 finally lands there. It's like, this is a guy without an ACL. Everybody's talking it up. The Steelers, speaking of Hines Ward, a player that played without an ACL. Greg Lloyd played without an ACL. Payton Wilson, injury history, just about everything you can see or read. Film, analysis, talking him up, Pro Football Focus grades. This guy has almost like elite level traits. Their coverage grade on him for 2023 was a 90.4, and their overall was an 89.9. 12 games played this year, 11 last year. He's played 23 games. Where's my graphic at that I always need? The maths with Joe. 23 games played over the last 2 seasons. Sure seems to me that when you're playing over 1,300 snaps of college ball without an injury, maybe this won't be a problem. Maybe it is. But you know what? When you're almost at the 100th pick, I know everybody wants every pick to pan out and be that gold jacket in Canton at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. It just doesn't work that way. But this guy was a tackling machine. Payton Wilson. Got to make sure I don't say Peyton Willis, the old running back from the Cleveland Browns that was on the cover of John Madden Football of all things. So Payton Wilson, another Wilson, Roman Wilson, Russell Wilson, they're just adding them all. Surprised they didn't go after Zach Wilson. Thank God they didn't. 92 tackles last year, 47 the year before, assisted 31, and then 19 tackles. Just a tackling machine, just attacks the football, has closing speed, played more coverage snaps in both of the last 2 seasons than he did run defense snaps, and also rushed the passer a little bit as well. You can find him all over the place. He lines up on the D line, he lines up in the slot, he lines up in the box, and he's even found himself deep or as a corner. Now, it's not where the Steelers really want their linebackers, but let me explain the upside of this. The Steelers currently have another linebacker that is, running it back, trying to make a comeback in Cole Holcomb, a free agent last year, former team captain when he was with the Commanders. Solid free agent signing, right? But got hurt, has had some knee issues over the years. Landon Roberts, he was only signed to a 2-year deal, so this year is the second of that 2-year deal. He could be gone next year. They just signed Patrick Queen to an awful lot of money. Holcomb and Roberts also have some money tied up, and if I'm not mistaken, Cole Holcomb may even have an out in next year's part of his contract. This is like a vote. This isn't a vote of confidence against Cole Holcomb. He doesn't cost a super fortune, $7.6 million. Probably should be starting alongside Patrick Queen. And then Roberts, of course, is the thumper. He's not the guy that should be in coverage. This is something that hurt the Steelers, particularly against the Buffalo Bills. How are they supposed to cover guys? Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs that's coming across the middle, any of these little scat backs out of the backfield. This could be, Payton Wilson's like bread and butter. He may not need to be relied on all the time to make sure that knee just stays healthy all the time. But you know who else had knee, not missing like ACL, but had knee issues in college before becoming a pro? He played tight end first and converted to being a linebacker as well, but as an edge rusher. TJ Watt. So I need to remind everybody of that. Maybe don't put the medicals right up front and be, overbearing about it. You know what I mean? The Fontenot stuff from yesterday was just everybody all over the place. Oh, the Steelers have like 3 left tackles and no right tackle and no center. And it's like, come on, let them do day 2 of the draft here. Now, Payton Willis, he was a fast guy too. He's got a 4.43 40-yard dash. And I'm doing a ho humming over here because I was just talking about Deontay Johnson at a 4.52, and his 10-yard split was only like 1/1000th of a second or whatever faster than Payton Wilson. Everybody got spooked by this guy's physical traits, and everything I read, everything I see is like he's going to jump in here. And he's going to be a starter in the league and can start on practically anyone's defense. He's going to be a fun player to watch. If it doesn't end up working out, I don't think it's the end of the world, but we know that Mark Robinson was already a project that only played linebacker 1 year in college before they took him 6th round, 7th round a couple of years ago. They don't seem overly confident of utilizing Robinson much beyond special teams. And when they have to, they went out and they got Miles Jack. They went out and got Michael Walker. That tried to get a lot of help when there were injuries. And it's been unfortunate that they've had injuries at this position. Of course, why can't I think of his name now? Quan Alexander as well. Somebody I really liked as a free agent pickup, but just has not been able to stay healthy. What a great player, but just bad luck when it comes to health. So Payton Wilson, he had 6 sacks last year too. He's had 10.5 over the last 2 years. Again, well, healthy. Trying to find all of his tackles for loss are just through the roof. 17.5 tackles for loss last season in 2022, 12.5 tackles for loss. He also has 4 interceptions. That's over the 23 games that he's played. It's just, those are just mind-blowing numbers to have 20 or 30 sacks, 30 tackles for loss, 10.5 sacks, and then the 4 interceptions. If this guy if somebody knew that he had an extra like ligament in his knee, it's a 1st-round pick. I mean, we're talking about like at least a Jack Campbell type level player, maybe even better than that. So very exciting to see him land there. It's very reminiscent to me as how Darnell Washington ended up falling and sliding right to the Steelers. This is a case example, I think, of center was a need here on day 2. Wide receiver was a need here on day 2. And then best available. And this machine, the Steelers defense, runs the best it can when there's linebackers and there's depth. And you finally have some starters that are, as this like rebuild in progress has been going on, you're finally getting starters that are entrenched. Not every spot is open for rookies to be there. The ones that they're taking right now, if this draft class pans out, look out, especially with what you've got in the Koffers here with you've got a hungry Russell Wilson's out there just virtual high-fiving everybody over on Twitter and telling them that, welcome to the Berg, welcome to this and that. Like, this guy is like turning into a Yinzer before our very eyes. The other thing I wanted to kind of bring up before I sign off here, kind of a shorter show, quick hits. I could go through a bunch. I might look at some of these, like what is now the best available. Okay, we could definitely do that. And it gets tough because, like I said, the Steelers now, again, they're drafting here in the 4th round, don't have a 5th round pick, have 2 6s and no 7s. And you start getting really deep in the weeds here as far as like team needs. And I've said, well, there's some defensive linemen maybe that they could maybe take a look at. Some of the folks that they've had in for like visits. I think I mentioned Christian Boyd from Northern Iowa was one of those players. Let's see who else have they had in on visits that were like pretty lower. MJ Devonshire, corner out of Pittsburgh, could be an undrafted free agent or UDFA, as I would say. Daquan Hardy out of Penn State is in, and Sean Stevens out of Ferris State. Those are all guys in that category. They had Beanie Bishop in, a local visit from West Virginia. So those are all guys to kind of look at. In fact, all of these guys were Payton Wilson, along with the 2 linemen, Zach Frazier and Troy Fontenot. They were all top 30 visits for the Pittsburgh Steelers. They had a little more than that. They had like 34, 35 because the local ones don't count. So like Zach Frazier, West Virginia is considered a local school. Penn State considered a local school. Pittsburgh considered a local school. So those guys kind of get disqualified from that consideration. They didn't look at a whole lot of defensive linemen. There were still various, offensive linemen that they may have interest in. Mason McCormick out of South Dakota State, Stephen Jones out of Oregon. I'm not even sure Jones. I'm trying to remember if he was even a combine visit. Travis Glover, Georgia State, a smaller school. So these are some UDFA type guys. Maybe they may even still look at. There's looking at some of the wide receivers. Taj Washington is the only one that's still left from those top 30 visits out of USC. He's also a very physical guy. So those are the ones out of the top 30 visits that I could like really put out there. As far as team needs, I think they could go like best player available. Again, a defensive lineman makes a lot of sense from the aspects of you're looking at a 35-year-old Cam Hayward, a soon to be 35, soon to be 30-year-old Larry Ogunjobi. He still has 2 years left on his contract, where Cam is in the final year of his deal. Marvin Leal regressed last year. Keanu Benton was a slam dunk, but needs to not have a sophomore slump here entering his 2nd year in the NFL. So you've got some guys that are there. Isaiah Loudermilk's another one that is entering the final year of his rookie deal. So they might want to look for some players for depth or guys that could play some special teams. Defensive line seems smart to me. They could still go maybe with more offensive linemen. They could always add a second receiver somewhere out of here. Like I said, Taj Washington being maybe one of those. So that's as far as like the targets that might still be available that are out there. I'm still surprised. I think Troy Franklin, he still hasn't been drafted out of Oregon. You never know. Would they go like back to back? I'm not sure that they would go that far. And I'm trying to see like maybe no. I think the running back out of Washington had already gone too. This is where you start to get fuzzy after there's been 100 picks. You're like, when you're not paying the closest attention to a position like running back, for example. So they could always use a running back maybe, but I don't know about a running back as an actual punt returner though. Maybe in the kick return or in special teams. Remember Benny Snell making a lot of tackles back there too. I think they're fairly set when it comes to maybe outside linebacker or edge, but like I said, this team runs when it comes to linebackers. And of course they haven't selected a corner. I don't know that I have anyone else that's high up on this list. TJ Tampa out of Iowa State is still out there. DJ James from Auburn, Chris Abrams Drain from Mizzou, Kalen Carson, Wake Forest, Cam Hart, Notre Dame. Those are the top 5 that are available. I know Ray Fittipaldo, and he nailed this with the Payton Wilson pick, I think, in one of his mock drafts. He likes Kyrie Jackson out of Oregon. I see that name that's still out here too, but those guys are kind of starting to scatter around day 3, and some of it starts to become a dart throw. My final thought on all of this, just to put a bow on this, is I think the Steelers got tremendous value for the players they picked and where they picked them. Let me give you an example. Troy Fontenot. Going to catch me. 21st pick overall by the Pittsburgh Steelers. Daniel Jeremiah from NFL Network, Moving the Sticks, had him ranked 11th overall. And I know you could say whatever you want on paper about draft rankings, but everybody's trying to guess where everybody's going and as to whether or not that this young man, is he a first rounder, is he this or is he that? When you have all these people that are so-called experts, they blow it sometimes. But when they're all kind of in the same line here, because Mel Kiper has him at 10, Jeremiah has him at 11, Pro Football Focus ranked him as 15th. This is overall of all the prospects. Falls to the Steelers at 21. Feel that's pretty good value. I don't feel that that's just like something that's like there's just full-blown luck, though, right? That can happen very easily. And he's what, like the third, fourth, fifth tackle that's off the board? A lot of tackles. In fact, this draft might seem like it's full of talent in certain positions. I think some of that still carry over from some of the players who opted out of COVID or got additional eligibility because of that. We certainly saw that at the quarterback position. That may not ever happen again with 6 quarterbacks in the first round. Okay, so you have Zach Frazier. The Steelers nab him at 51. Kiper's the only one who had him lower. He had him at 53. Jeremiah had him at 37. Pro Football Focus at 33. Roman Wilson. Jeremiah had him at 58. Kiper at 43. Pro Football Focus 42. The Steelers get him at 84. So they had him ranked ahead of a lot of the other wide receivers that ended up going in the second and third rounds on day 2. And then, of course, Payton Wilson, the man I was talking about the most here at the tail end of this show, 98th overall selection to the Pittsburgh Steelers, was ranked by Jeremiah, Kiper, and PFF. Not 98, not 80s, not 60s, 70s, or anything like that. Jeremiah has him 41. Mel Kiper has him 55. Pro Football Focus had him ranked as their 30th best prospect. They felt he was a first rounder. Wow, that's something. So, folks, if you like what I brought to you tonight, I'm sorry, I'm still losing my voice. It's been a long 2 days of coverage. We appreciate each and every one of you that hang out here, that watch us and listen to the show. If you like what you're watching or listening to, don't forget to like, comment, or subscribe, particularly subscribe. And we have content coming to you every single week, sometimes twice a week. Depends on the news and stuff that we have. We don't try and drown you out with, just boring topics here. We need to be entertained too. We enjoy doing this. We don't do this for the clicks. We don't do this for the views and all the yucks and to just throw out clickbait and all these other things, right? We're not here to be sensational. We're here to talk football and try and be sensible and look at it from different angles. Sometimes get called too optimistic, but it's hard to not be optimistic. Do you see all the people in these war rooms that are high-fiving each other before the pick's even announced? Everybody's excited about bringing these young men into their organization and to see if they can help make these teams into contenders. And by golly, we should too. So if you like what you're listening or watching or whatever, if you're still paying attention to me, also leave a rating or review where you are. We really appreciate that. We'll be back with you early next week. I believe Flash will be back. I usually don't always do all of these solo, but everyone else dipped on me, man. It was a party tonight, right? So once again, we appreciate you supporting Steel City Underground and the Steel City Underground podcast. We have a website too, where we have some written articles that are out there, and you can also find this show at a number of different places if you head to steelcityunderground.com and all these various social media outlets that are out there on the interwebs. Until next time, my name is Joe Kuzma, and as we always do when we sign off on these shows, we encourage everyone out there to be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.